They say peace is priceless. But apparently, on Mosswood Hill, it costs exactly one garden shed, painted neon blue, with a corrugated tin roof that squeaks in the wind like a mouse on a treadmill. I bought my slice of quiet 3 years ago, a single-story cottage with a wraparound porch, tucked at the edge of a sleepy, pine-covered hilltop. I wasn't after much. Just a place where the sunrise hit my coffee at the perfect angle and the wind didn't carry anyone else's voice. I had the best view on the block, an uninterrupted sweep of rolling forest, miles of treetops, and at night, a sky so clear you could see satellites drifting across the stars. That changed one Thursday morning when I walked outside and saw it. There, standing like a middle finger between my rocking chair and the horizon, was a brand new shed. Not just any shed. A towering, 12-foot-tall monstrosity built entirely out of mismatched materials and bad decisions. Neon blue walls, a rust-colored roof, and a satellite dish bolted to the side like it had ambitions of becoming a moon base. I stood there, toothbrush still in my mouth, foam dripping down my chin, just blinking. It belonged to a man named Ron Delaney. Ron had moved in 2 months prior, buying the lot directly downhill from mine. He drove a truck the size of a small building, wore socks with sandals, and once spent 30 minutes telling me about his back tattoo of the Tasmanian devil. I'd nodded politely. Until now, Ron had been nothing more than loud background noise. Now he was an obstruction. The shed sat dead center in my line of sight. It was technically on his property, sure, but just barely. Close enough that if I sneezed too hard, I might rattle one of the tin panels loose. At first, I thought, no big deal. I'll talk to him. Maybe he didn't realize. So I strolled down the slope, knocked on Ron's door, and was greeted by the pungent smell of beer and gasoline. He stepped out wearing a tank top with a bald eagle riding a Harley across the chest. "Morning," I said. "Hey, quick thing. That shed you put up, did you mean for it to be that tall?" He grinned like I'd complimented his haircut. "Oh yeah. Custom job. Built it myself. Needed space for my workshop/gym/ham radio command center." "Right," I said. "Only thing is, it sort of blocks the view from my place." "The whole view, actually." Ron shrugged. "You still got sky." I blinked. I had trees. Stars. Fog rolling over the pines. "Yeah," he said, scratching his stomach, "but I got rights. My property. Can build whatever I want, so long as it ain't a meth lab." Then he laughed. Not that I haven't been tempted. I left without another word. I spent that evening on my porch, looking at the roofline that had decapitated my horizon. The stars were still there, but now they hovered just above a glowing blue wall. A glowing wall with a motion light that kept flickering on every time a moth so much as farted. That was the moment I knew, this wasn't going to be solved with conversation. This was going to take strategy. It started with a note. Not a conversation. Not a knock. Not even a passive-aggressive wave from the driveway. No, it was a note, taped to my mailbox, printed on beige cardstock with a font that screamed 1997 wedding invitation. "Dear neighbor," it read. "Please be advised that excessive noise after 9 p.m. violates our unofficial but highly encouraged neighborhood quiet hours. Sincerely, Barbara Delaney." Barbara. That was the first time I saw her name, and I already didn't like her. See, after my failed shed conversation with Ron, I tried to live and let live. I told myself the view wasn't everything. I repositioned my rocking chair. I even ordered one of those sunset simulator lamps off the internet, just to fool my body into thinking the horizon hadn't been butchered by a glorified tool shack. But apparently, running my table saw in the garage at 9:07 p.m., a full 7 minutes past her imaginary curfew, was a criminal offense worthy of paper warnings. At first, I thought maybe Ron had taken up scrapbooking. But when I walked down the slope the next morning, I saw a second car in his driveway, a silver Lexus with Florida plates and a license plate frame that said "I brake for zoning violations." Barbara Delaney had arrived. Ron was out front with a leaf blower pointed at absolutely nothing, wearing earmuffs and a grin. Barbara stood beside him like a statue carved from judgmental marble. She wore high-waisted khakis, a pastel polo shirt buttoned all the way to the throat, and the unmistakable aura of someone who called the manager before ordering. Morning, I said, waving. Barbara smiled the way villains do in kids' movies. Hello there. We were just making the place a little more presentable. Things got a little loose while Ron was living alone, didn't they, Ron? Ron nodded like a man who knew better than to argue. Got your note, I added, holding it up. Very formal. Didn't know we had official neighborhood quiet hours. Oh, they're not official, she said, tilting her head. They're just respected. People here value tranquility. I value visibility, I said. But we can't always get what we want. Barbara blinked, then turned to Ron. You hear that? He's a philosopher. I walked away. That was day 1. On day 2, she installed a motion-activated sprinkler near the edge of their property, a sprinkler that just so happened to spray directly onto my gravel path every time I walked to the mailbox. On day 3, she filed a complaint with the local council about unauthorized land grading, which, near as I could tell, meant I'd raked my side yard. By day 5, she had laminated signs posted along the hill. Private slope, do not trespass. Protected green view corridor, under family observation. I didn't even know what that meant. Barbara had been there less than a week, and it already felt like Mosswood Hill had been annexed. She introduced herself to every neighbor like she was running for HOA president, which we didn't even have, by the way. She organized a neighborhood integrity committee consisting of herself, Ron, and a folding table. She distributed handouts titled Maintaining the Character of Mosswood and included a checklist of behaviors to avoid. Top of the list, passive property intimidation. Whatever that was. And through it all, that hideous blue shed loomed like a cathedral to suburban tyranny. It wasn't just the eyesore anymore. It was the headquarters. One evening, I caught her painting the trim around the roofline gold. Actual gold paint. She said it added architectural dignity. It looked like a gas station wearing a crown. That night, I sat on my porch, glaring down the hill with a lemonade in hand and vengeance on my mind. I'd spent decades designing quiet, unobtrusive buildings for a living, schools, libraries, visitor centers tucked into hillsides, and now my personal sanctuary was being turned into a live-action episode of HRA nightmares. I needed a plan. So, I started where every great story of justice begins, the county assessor's website. It took some digging, a few phone calls, and a politely awkward conversation with a clerk named Janet who insisted on reading every parcel code aloud, but eventually, I found it. Ron's property line ended 4 feet before the shed began. 4 feet. That towering neon barn was sitting, in part, on my land. My beautiful, sloped, fully deeded hillside. I triple-checked the GIS map, printed it out in color, and went outside with a flashlight and some surveyor's flags. And there it was, the encroachment. The back corner of the shed jutted over onto my property like it was leaning in to whisper oops. So I did what any level-headed man would do. I built a fence. Not a big one. Just a neat, 6-foot-tall wooden fence running directly through the part of the shed that violated my property. I installed it at sunrise, level, legal, and beautiful in its spite. It sliced right through the shed like a hot knife through drywall. One half remained on Ron's property, still open and operational. The other half, the back quarter with a mini-fridge and what looked like a taxidermied raccoon, was now on my side, fenced off, padlocked, and accessorized with a bright red sign. Private land. Entry by permission only. Ron was the first to notice. He came stumbling down the hill shirtless, holding a box of nails. Hey, what the hell is this? I handed him a copy of the parcel map. Shed squatting on my side. Just drawing a line, Ron. You can't just cut my shed in half. Didn't. Just fenced off my property. He stared at the fence like it had insulted his mother. It's gonna ruin the feng shui. Barbara arrived moments later, wearing gloves and carrying a clipboard. This is hostile, she declared. No, I said, it's geometry. I'll report this. To who? The fence feelings department. She huffed. This isn't over. I hope not, I said. I've got plenty of lumber. That night, I sat in my chair and watched as Ron and Barbara held a flashlight meeting on their half of the shed. The gold trim glittered under the beam like a bad omen. I'd drawn first blood, not with noise or confrontation, but with boundaries. Legal ones. Physical ones. The kind that made a Karen seethe in silence. The war had begun. It took exactly 3 days for Barbara to retaliate. Not with another note. No, that would have been too subtle. Instead, she escalated the conflict with a level of passive-aggressive brilliance that could only be described as Karenian warfare. On the morning of day 3, I woke up to the sound of hammering. Not the casual kind you expect from a neighbor hanging a picture or repairing a fence. This was heavy, relentless, nail-a-coffin-shut hammering. When I stepped onto my porch, thermos in hand, I nearly dropped it. Barbara and Ron were erecting a flagpole. Not just any flagpole, a gleaming, 25-foot aluminum monstrosity planted directly uphill from their remaining half of the shed. It was topped with a solar-powered golden eagle, wings spread wide like it was about to deliver a sermon. The American flag flapped proudly beneath it, along with a second flag I could only describe as deeply confusing. It had a stylized house silhouette, a gavel, and the words, "Stand strong, Mosswood." I stared at it for a solid minute. Ron waved. Barbara shouted over the clatter, "We thought the hill needed some patriotic presence." "Or you just needed something taller than my fence," I called back. She smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had just used a coupon to get you kicked out of your own dinner reservation. That evening, I noticed more activity: folding tables, string lights, tiki torches. A Bluetooth speaker played country music with the volume cranked just high enough to be annoying but not quite high enough to report. By the next morning, flyers were tucked under doormats up and down the hill. Neighborhood Unity Night. Join us for food, music, and a celebration of Mosswood values. Hosted by the Delaney family. Don't worry, we have a permit. Permit. That word was underlined. I stood in my driveway reading it, jaw clenched. Ron and Barbara were throwing a full-on community party, and they were throwing it at the shed. A party at a structure that was now, at least partially, on my land. I called the county planning office. "Hi, Janet," I said. "It's me again." She sighed, but with the kind of resigned fondness that only civil servants can manage. "What now, Mr. Patterson?" "I need to check on a permit. There's a party happening this Saturday at 143 Mosswood Trail, and I want to confirm it's, legal." I heard keys tapping. Then a pause. "There is a temporary gathering permit filed," she said. "For an outdoor event not exceeding 50 guests. Approved 2 days ago." "Does it say anything about structures?" "Nope. Just the gathering." "Would it matter if some of the party was taking place on land the hosts don't own?" Janet went quiet. "Hypothetically," I added. She sighed again. "If you're saying what I think you're saying, you may want to send an email and submit a boundary claim." I did exactly that. But Saturday came too quickly. Around 3 p.m., people started showing up. Lawn chairs. Crockpots. Someone brought a karaoke machine. Ron wore a sleeveless t-shirt that said Mosswood Manpower. Barbara wore a sash that said Community Coordinator. She stood by the gate, which she'd propped open with a decorative planter, and greeted people like they were entering a wedding reception. I watched it all from my porch, sipping lemonade with the intensity of a man watching a raccoon crawl into his attic. I wasn't planning to make a scene. I'd already taken photos. Already submitted my claim. Already measured the exact square footage of their party zone that overlapped my deeded land. I just wanted them to cross the line, literally. And oh, did they? By 5 p.m., Ron had extended the buffet table right up to my fence. Someone strung lights between the flagpole and the corner of the shed, the part on my land. A woman with a name tag that said Linda, Pie Captain, started serving slices of apple pie directly from the disputed zone. Then came the pylon. I didn't see it at first. I just heard Ron shout, "Hey Barb! Where you want the beacon?" Beacon? A teenager wheeled it out on a cart, an actual construction pylon topped with a blinking orange light. Barbara wasn't the type to take a loss quietly. I knew this because 4 days after the Great Party Pushback, as I'd come to call it, she had a land surveyor standing on my lawn with a measuring wheel and a neon vest, pointing a little laser at my decorative boundary stones like they were national secrets. I was trimming my hedges when I saw him. The guy looked like a friendly retiree, probably used to surveying fence lines for picket disputes and boat sheds, not being caught in the middle of a slow-burn property war. I approached with my usual blend of caution and lemonade. "Afternoon," I said, raising my cup. "Don't suppose you're here to admire the view?" The man jumped a little. "Oh, hello. Just conducting a third-party survey." "For who?" He hesitated. "Barbara Delaney. She filed a contestation request." "Of course she did. She thinks my fence is on her land." I asked, trying to keep my voice friendly. "She filed a claim stating the original corner pins were misaligned due to soil shift," he replied, reading off his clipboard. "She wants to re-establish boundary control." "Soil shift?" He gave a little shrug, the universal language for "I don't get paid enough for this." "Mind if I tag along?" I asked. He hesitated again. "I'm not allowed to take a side." "Good," I said. "I just want to see how my land's being remeasured." To his credit, he was thorough. We walked the perimeter. He pointed out tree roots, old survey pins, and even a rusted horseshoe buried near the base of my mailbox post. I showed him my deed, my laminated maps, and the email from Janet at the county confirming my measurements. In the end, he made a non-committal grunt and packed up his gear. "Find anything shocking?" I asked. "Nothing that justifies a flagpole rebellion," he muttered. Barbara was waiting at the bottom of the hill like a queen receiving wartime news. When she saw us approaching, her expression was split between anticipation and the kind of fake sympathy that precedes bad medical news. "Well?" she asked. The surveyor gave her a polite smile. "Lot lines appear consistent with current records. Your contestation may need further review at the municipal level." Translation: "You lost, but I won't say it to your face." Barbara's eyes narrowed. "Further review," she repeated. "Interesting." She turned to me. "You do realize you've backed yourself into a legal corner, don't you?" "Funny," I said. "I was just thinking the same about your shed." That was the moment I knew we were beyond neighborhood drama. We had officially entered Cold War territory. The next morning, the shade tree vanished. It was an old silver maple that had stood on the edge of Ron's property, just downhill from my fence. It didn't block my view. In fact, it cast the perfect afternoon shadow across the western side of my yard, just enough to keep my tomato plants from scorching and my reading chair cool during sunset hours. Gone. Just gone. The stump was still smoking. I stared at it from the porch, heart sinking. Barbara, now wearing oversized sunglasses and a sun hat, walked by sipping tea like a woman in a southern soap opera. "Tree had root rot," she called out. "We had to take it down for safety. Can't risk falling limbs." I glanced at the stump. It looked perfectly healthy. "Odd," I said. "Looked strong as ever last week." "Oh no," she said sweetly. "The rot was internal." Just like you, I thought. I don't know if she took it down out of spite or strategy, maybe both. Either way, it was a message. A quiet, calculated removal of something that brought me joy. And she did it with just enough legal ambiguity that fighting it would look petty. Two can play that game. So I called in a friend. His name was Dennis. A former broadcast technician with a penchant for weird hobbies and an obsession with off-grid satellite TV. He once helped a guy rig a backyard movie theater using nothing but a projector, a tarp, and an old satellite dish bolted to a grill. When I told Dennis what I wanted, he grinned like a man given permission to go full mad scientist. We worked all weekend. Step 1. We mounted a large, highly visible satellite dish to a post at the corner of my property, precisely angled toward nothing. Step 2. We wrapped the base in blinking Christmas lights and labeled it Experimental Weather Relay. Step 3. We built a small structure beside it. A hut, really. With a tin roof, 4 legs, and a sign that read, "Data testing in progress, do not disturb." Ron spotted us halfway through. "Pato, what the hell is that?" "Scientific installation," I replied. "Solar observation. Atmospheric telemetry." "Telemetry?" "Yup. Got permits and everything." We didn't, but nobody was asking. By Monday, Barbara had filed a noise complaint for emissions and a visual obstruction claim due to satellite glare. I responded with a written statement that the dish was decorative, a yard sculpture celebrating analog signal heritage. Janet from the county called later that week. "You're pushing it, Mr. Patterson," she said, half laughing. "Am I breaking any laws?" "No." "Then consider it art." The tension grew like mildew in a damp bathroom. The neighborhood divided into 3 camps: Team Karen, Team me, and Team I just want to mow my lawn in peace. Rumors flew. Someone said I was building a radio tower. Someone else said Barbara was suing me for emotional distress. None of it was true, yet. That Friday, I found a drone hovering above my yard. Just buzzing silently like a digital hornet. I watched it from my porch chair, then walked inside, grabbed my own remote, and launched my drone, a retired quadcopter Dennis had gifted me. It took off with a high-pitched whine and zipped straight toward the intruder. The 2 machines met mid-air and danced like angry birds. Eventually, the foreign drone retreated, flying back over Barbara's fence. Game, set, privacy. I didn't mention it. Neither did she. But the next morning, a sign appeared on the Delaney's lawn. Drone-free zone. Violators will be prosecuted. Underneath it, proud supporters of neighborhood privacy. I put up a matching sign that said, proud supporters of not starting it. It was petty. It was ridiculous. And it was glorious. The cherry on top came Sunday evening. I was roasting marshmallows in my fire pit when Mason, the teenager from down the road, stopped by with his younger brother. They asked if they could sit and listen to another story about the shed war. I gave them the short version, with dramatic pauses and exaggerated voices. They laughed so hard Mason dropped his marshmallow into the fire. As they left, his little brother said, "You should write a book." "Maybe I will," I replied. Chapter 1, Never Trust a Flagpole. Barbara watched it all from her window. The war was still on, but I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building a legacy. I wasn't expecting the catering truck. It pulled into Ron's gravel driveway at precisely 11:04 a.m. on a Tuesday, its shiny chrome siding reflecting sunlight in a way that practically screamed budget flexing. The side of the truck read "Fork and Flour, Elevated Eats for Elite Events." I sipped my coffee and watched as 2 employees unloaded folding tables, a pink-draped archway, and what appeared to be an industrial-grade chocolate fondue fountain. A fondue fountain. On a hill. With a breeze. That's when I knew Barbara was planning something big. The flyers came out by noon, fancy parchment paper with gold trim, hand-delivered in cream-colored envelopes sealed with a wax stamp. The Mosswood Gala. A formal dinner event for neighbors with a taste for culture, courtesy of Barbara Delaney. Location, the Mosswood Community Terrace. Formerly known as Ron's Shed Area. Dress code, semi-formal. RSVP required. I read it 3 times. Community Terrace? That neon blue monstrosity with its gold trim, satellite scars, and poorly camouflaged sprinkler lines was now a terrace? A few neighbors passed by that afternoon, trying not to make eye contact. I couldn't blame them. The battle had shifted into new territory, one of reputation, perception, and polish. Barbara was no longer just trying to fence me out or glare me into submission. She was attempting a full rebrand. She wanted to paint herself as the benevolent leader of Mosswood Hill, hosting elegant affairs in what was still, and let me be painfully clear, a chopped-in-half shed that technically encroached on my land. I wasn't invited. Which, honestly, was the best part. I spent the next 48 hours observing quietly. The tables came first, white cloths, centerpieces made of fake lilies, individually wrapped cutlery sets with napkin rings. Then came the wine crates. The string quartet. The DJ. A string quartet and a DJ. Ron even hung fairy lights from the flagpole to the corners of the terrace. One snapped under the weight and fell onto a folding chair. I'll admit I may have chuckled louder than necessary. By the day of the gala, the yard looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine printed for people who think the word cozy means $800 linen napkins. Guests arrived in pastel polos and modest cocktail dresses, wine glasses already half full. Barbara stood at the entrance with a clipboard and a Bluetooth headset, welcoming them like she was coordinating a royal summit. That's when she made her mistake. She expanded. I saw it from my porch, 2 employees carrying a drink station beyond the legal property line, setting it up smack in the middle of the disputed strip behind the shed. My land. Again. I stood, calmly put down my lemonade, and walked back into the house to grab the paperwork. 5 minutes later, I arrived at the edge of the party carrying a folded-up camping chair, a mini cooler, and a copy of the land deed tucked under my arm. Ron spotted me first. "Evening, Pato," he called, already flushed from the wine. "Evening," I replied, unfolding my chair and planting it precisely next to the drink table. Barbara descended like a hawk, heels clicking across the grass. "I'm afraid this is a private event," she said, voice tight. "I'm afraid this is my property," I said, holding up the deed. She glanced at the drink station, then back at me. "That's not possible," she hissed. I pulled out my phone, opened the parcel map, and showed her the satellite overlay. "This line here? Your land. This line here? Mine. You're crashing a neighborhood event. You're hosting it on my dirt." She stared for a moment, then pivoted on her heel, whispering into her headset like a Secret Service agent under siege. I stayed. For the entire party. I sat in my camping chair, reading a paperback mystery novel, sipping soda from a can, and occasionally reminding guests that their shoes were technically on private property. Some laughed. A few apologized. One couple moved their chairs 6 inches to the left. Ron brought me a brownie. Barbara, meanwhile, was slowly unraveling. Every time someone glanced in my direction, her smile tightened another degree. By dessert, she looked like a mannequin trying not to cry. But she wasn't done. No, Barbara was just getting desperate. 2 days later, the backhoe arrived. I was weeding my garden when I heard the low growl of machinery. I looked up and saw it crawling up the hill like a metal beetle of doom, its scoop poised like a clenched fist. Ron guided it with hand signals while Barbara stood beside a pile of flagstone and a roll of caution tape. "Landscaping project," Ron called cheerfully. "Beautification," Barbara added, waving her clipboard like a scepter. They were building a retaining wall. Right at the boundary. Just inches from the shed, and once again overlapping the disputed zone. This time, I didn't even speak. I just filmed it. Then I called the zoning office. Janet, as always, picked up. "What did they build now?" "A retaining wall." "On your land?" I sent her the footage. 2 hours later, a city inspector was walking the hill with a laser measure, a clipboard, and a face like someone who just sat in gum. The next morning, a stop work order was taped to the backhoe scoop. The flagstone pile was roped off. The caution tape was doubled. Barbara watched it all from the porch, arms folded so tightly they looked like pretzels. I didn't wave. But later that night, someone egged my mailbox. I cleaned it off. Replaced the numbers. Then installed a motion-activated camera disguised as a garden gnome. 2 nights after that, the gnome caught Ron peeing behind a bush. I didn't say a word. Just printed a still shot and left it in their mailbox with a note that said, "Gnome surveillance sees all. P." Barbara stopped speaking to me entirely after that. But the blow that backfired the most came from someone I hadn't expected. Stephanie. You remember her, the sharp neighbor who once raised an eyebrow when Karen installed a gate back in that other war. Turns out, Stephanie had joined the zoning board as a part-time consultant. And after seeing the retaining wall stunt, and reviewing Barbara's gala permit, which failed to disclose alcohol service, loud music, or Ron's outdoor urinal, she submitted a full recommendation for compliance review. Which meant Barbara and Ron now had to pay a fine for unpermitted construction, remove the partially built wall, submit new landscaping plans for approval, attend a property boundaries and etiquette workshop. No joke, it's real. They tried to appeal. They lost. Ron called it an attack on masculinity. Barbara said it was bureaucratic tyranny. I called it justice in khaki slacks. By the end of the week, the backhoe was gone, the flags were down, and the chocolate fountain was listed for sale online. And for the first time in months, the shed sat silent. No banners. No party lights. No pylon beacons. Just one structure. Half theirs. Half useless. I watered my tomatoes. Sat in my chair. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't need to check for a drone. But something told me this wasn't the end. Barbara had taken hit after hit, and every time she slipped, she plotted. There was still one move she hadn't made. And if I knew anything about Karen types, it would involve lawyers. It arrived in a cream envelope with a gold border, the same kind Barbara used for her gala invitations. The return address was from a law firm in a nearby city, embossed in dramatic cursive like they were auditioning to represent royalty. Inside was a 4-page letter printed on thick, smug paper. At the top, encroachment, harassment, and interference with property enjoyment. Barbara had hired a lawyer. She was claiming that my satellite dish, fence, decorative stones, and persistent visual presence constituted a violation of her right to peaceful and uninhibited use of her property. She wanted me to remove my obstructions, pay for emotional damages, and agree to a cease and desist order preventing me from further monitoring or filming. I laughed so hard I dropped my coffee. This was it, her final move. The nuclear option. I called my own lawyer, a guy named Calvin who had the personality of a tired bloodhound but a brain like a steel trap. He read the letter once and chuckled. "She really submitted this?" he asked. "Full send," I replied. "Stamped and everything." "It's garbage," he said. "But let's play it smart." He drafted a polite but firm response. We included satellite images showing her retaining wall project on my land. My property deed, highlighting where the sheds still overlapped. Video footage of her private gala being hosted over the boundary line. The official stop work order from the county. And, cherry on top, a notarized letter from Stephanie, citing multiple failed compliance attempts and repeated public disturbances. We sent it off with a cover note that read, "We respectfully request no further correspondence unless it is to issue a formal apology or deliver baked goods." A week passed. Silence. Then another envelope arrived, not from a law firm this time, but directly from Barbara. Handwritten. I sat on the porch, heart thudding a little from curiosity. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Mr. Patterson, I have withdrawn my claim. The legal route has proven unfruitful. I will be stepping back from community involvement effective immediately. I believe we both value peace, in our own unique, if occasionally combative, ways. Best regards. Barbara Delaney." No apology. But no more threats either. And that was enough. Ron stayed quiet for the next few weeks. No power tools at midnight. No flag raising. No fondue fountains. Just the occasional nod if we crossed paths near the mailbox. The shed remained, now faded slightly by sun and silence. The gold trim had chipped. The fairy lights drooped like tired party streamers. Even the pylon was gone. In its place was a small herb garden, started by Ron's niece who came to visit for the summer. As for me, I kept my fence. My dish. My decorative stones. But I removed the laminated signs. The sarcastic ones. I didn't need them anymore. One evening, I found a basket on my porch, homemade banana bread, a 6-pack of local beer, and a card that read, "Thanks for standing your ground, and doing it with style." No name. Just a smiley face. That same weekend, the neighborhood newsletter went out, now edited by Stephanie. It featured an article titled, "Lessons from the Line, How Boundaries Make Us Better Neighbors." I wasn't named directly. But the cover photo was a wide shot of my fence, with the satellite dish in the background and a squirrel perched proudly on top. A few weeks later, during a Saturday cleanup event, Mason jogged over with a shovel and a grin. "Helping out today?" I asked. "Yep. Grandpa said I should mend fences before I build any." I chuckled. "Good man." Then came the kicker. Barbara moved. No farewell party. No final note. Just a moving truck on a Tuesday morning, its lift gate yawning like a tired mouth. I watched her load the last box into the backseat of her silver Lexus. She didn't look up until she was already in the car. Then, just before she pulled away, she rolled down the window. "Still got the fence?" I smiled. "Still on my land." She gave the faintest nod. then drove off. No drama. No explosions. Just a quiet retreat. It was over. The war that started with a shed and spiraled through flagpoles, satellites, drones, lawsuits, and chocolate fountains had finally found its end. Not in a court or a community vote, but in the slow, strange realization that maybe, just maybe, the fence wasn't the problem. It was the refusal to respect it. Now, I sit on my porch most evenings with a cooler by my side and a book in my lap. The sunset isn't what it used to be, the shed still blocks part of it, but I've shifted my chair just a few degrees to the left, and that sliver of gold sky still peeks through like it's smiling just for me. Sometimes neighbors walk by and wave. Sometimes Mason stops in for a soda. Sometimes Stephanie drops off a batch of cookies with a post-it that says no lawsuit ingredients included. And every once in a while, someone new moves in and asks about the shed, the fence, or the garden gnome with the camera in his hat. I tell them the story. The story of how a simple boundary became a battle, how pettiness met precision, and how sometimes, the best legacy you can leave behind isn't revenge or victory. It's peace on your terms. If you enjoyed this story of neighborhood warfare, pettiness, and poetic justice, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another chapter of drama served with humor. And hey, got a crazy HOA or property story of your own? Drop it in the comments below. We're always here for a good fence fight.